Violence should stop in Mexico, said the tired old man. Too many lives are lost. It destroys families. It thrusts youths into a life without future. Nobody will win this war. Then, having spoken, Ismael El Mayo Zambada García, one of the most fearsome cartel bosses of all Mexican history, waited to be sentenced. The sentencing came Monday, July 20th, life without parole. As an end for a man who moved drugs and people across America's southern border for decades, directly and indirectly responsible for uncounted deaths and lives destroyed at the hands of his Sinaloa Cartel, it was arguably somewhat less than he deserved. The death penalty had been taken off the table some time ago, and Zambada García is spared the worst possible federal lockup in ADX Florence, where his erstwhile Sinaloa partner Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Lara now permanently resides. And that is from El Mayo's End, a National Review by me, Joshua Treviño. This is The Hard Country.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Hard Country. My name is Ariana Guajardo, as always, joined by Joshua Treviño. What an opener you have in this article. So walk me through this, Josh. What were you thinking when you read his lines there?
You know, El Mayo, so Ismael Zambada García, El Mayo is one of the venerable originals in the modern cartel wars. He's been around for almost half a century, plying his trade. A couple years ago, he was probably kidnapped, flown to the United States, remanded to American custody. So his story is moving to maybe not a final end. He's obviously got some years.
Not the final end, at least.
Not the ultimate end to which we are all destined. Hopefully not in Supermax. But there's certainly a major chapter in his life ending, and he will spend the rest of his life in American custody for his crimes, as he ought. Those of you who watched Narcos Mexico.
Josh just found out I was not among those.
You have not watched Narcos Mexico?
Yes, I think you've talked me into it, though. I
think you should watch it, and I think I've recommended it on the show before. So faithful viewers, if you haven't watched the show, it's actually a pretty good exposition of at least the 1980s and some of the 1990s in the cartel wars. But El Mayo is one of the originals. He's been around since then, and what's been very interesting about him, and we can go into the details of what he means, because he's still terrifically important. He's not off the chessboard, so to speak, in terms of the broader context of the United States and Mexico, the Morena regime, the Department of Justice. He still has a lot of there's a lot left for him to give in terms of information and names.
But he knows something we don't know.
He knows quite a bit, and he's going to parcel that out to his own advantage. Shall we talk about how he came to American custody? I think that might be.
I would love to hear that. I think we went over it during the last podcast, but it's kind of coming up again and is still being spoken about by Claudia Sheinbaum, so I think it's important for us to speak about it too. So
what was interesting, we've had to kind of piece these facts together. So there's a narrative at hand, and what I want to emphasize to you and anybody else listening right now is that what I'm about to share may or may not be the entire truth. But what I think we can say is that there is a preferred narrative that has emerged that Zambada García, El Mayo himself, the government of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum and the president, and the United States Department of Justice, and his putative kidnapper, a man, a Chapito known as El Guero, we can talk about him.
Son of El Chapo?
All agree on, yes. So El Chapo had several sons. These are the Chapitos, and they've been slowly coming into American possession. That's probably not the right word, but American custody over the past couple of years. Two in particular that are of note. So as El Mayo tells it, he was invited to a meeting on July 25th, 2024, in Sinaloa. And interestingly enough, he says that he was told that meeting was going to be attended by the governor of Sinaloa, Rubén Rocha Moya, who is currently the senior-most Mexican official under indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice. So we can press pause on that, but it's very portentous that El Mayo thought he was going to meet with Rocha Moya. But he didn't meet with Rocha Moya. Instead, he met with Joaquin Guzman Lopez, who is one of the sons of the infamous El Chapo. All these guys have nicknames, by the way. So Ismael Zambada is El Mayo.
I feel like that's how you know that you made it within this kind of world. If you get a really cool cartel nickname, then you're one of the cool guys in their leagues.
I think though that there is this element of Mexican and absolutely South Texas culture where you just get a nickname that's based upon your most unusual feature. Yeah, which is why people called El Gordo, El Flaco, people like that.
Oh, I was gonna say my mom. She was real skinny growing up, so
she's La Flaca.
Yeah, I think for some of them, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. But for sure, if you are a major cartel figure, like you get almost these G.I. Joe code names. So El Raton is Ovidio Guzman, who's the other Chapito who's going to enter into the story real quick. And so yes, El Rey is El Mayo's younger brother.
That's a cool one.
Well, his name is Reynaldo. It's not very creative.
Okay,
but
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it sounds like the king, so I'd be like, you're like high up then.
He's really not a king of anything at all. He's in jail. He got
the name, Josh. That means he at least has some creds.
That's true. So yes. So El Guero, who is the individual
the
who
really white one of the group.
Yes, kidnapped El Mayo, put him on a plane. And the story goes like this, that for reasons known only to him, that this Chapito El Guero lures El Mayo into this meeting, presumably with Sinaloa Governor Rubén Rocha Moya. The governor's not there. He's kidnapped. El Mayo was kidnapped instead. And then both El Mayo and his kidnapper, El Guero, fly to the United States, where they are both arrested and put into the custody of the United States. And so the story that is told by the U.S. Department of Justice, including former Ambassador Ken Salazar, is that it's not our plane, it's not our men, it's not our operation, that we just gratefully received this apparently spontaneous gesture by a cartel boss to kidnap himself and another cartel boss and go to the U.S. Now, you tell me how credible you find that.
Well, and that's what Claudia Sheinbaum keeps bringing up as well, because she feels and has continued to say that Mexico's been lied to by the United States, and therefore we can have no real trust in the United States.
Indeed. Well, the absence of trust goes both ways, because of course, if we assume, which we have no direct evidence for, but if we assume that the United States knew about this operation and maybe even ran it, which is my pet theory. I think we had a lot to do with it, but that's just a theory. I know that there's somebody out there in Mexican media who is going to generate a headline saying that Joshua Treviño accuses the United States government of interference in Mexican sovereignty.
And you'd correct him and say, no, I theorized.
Yes, I theorize it, but I think it's a fairly defensible theory. The argument that gets made from Palacio Nacional, from Claudia Sheinbaum and others, is that this trespass upon Mexican sovereignty, that's the real crime. Like, the real crime isn't decades of cartel leadership. The real crime is that somehow Mexican sovereignty was trespassed upon. Well, of course, the reason, if in fact that is the case, which I think it probably is, that we didn't entrust the Mexicans with the information is because, of course, we know. And there's just a ton of evidence to the point that this whole Sinaloa crowd is hand in glove with the Morena regime that rules Mexico right now. There's no way you can arrest a figure like El Guero, like El Mayo, or their respective brothers El Rey and El Raton. You can't do it while informing the Mexican government, because the Mexican state will step in to protect them. As I think we have seen post facto, one interesting detail that I actually had forgotten about completely in researching this piece was that shortly after the kind of whatever you want to call it, the extradition, it wasn't an extradition, but the rendition or the flight of these two drug lords to the United States in July 2024, was that the Mexican federal authorities, the Fiscalía General de la República, so it's FGR, it's the equivalent of our Department of Justice, basically, actually charged El Guero with treason. Like, he was charged with kidnapping, and then he was charged with treason. And he was charged, and the technical grounds on which he was charged with treason is that apparently there's an article in the Mexican Constitution. I don't remember if we talked about the Mexican Constitution.
No, we haven't gone into
this. Can I do a sidebar on that real
please.
quick? Because this is pretty interesting. there's an article in the Mexican Constitution where if you voluntarily subordinate a fellow Mexican to a foreign power, you have committed treason, I suppose.
Okay,
so,
I was trying to figure out how there would have been a treason charge.
I
guess that makes sense, or that would make sense how he could get the charge. The thing that still is a little bit interesting is that Mexico would choose to pursue the charge of treason for a cartel member.
It sends a message, though, doesn't it? Because
right.
of course, the impression that one gets is that it's treasonous because the Sinaloa Cartel and the regime are so closely identified with one another. I mean, that's the actual like normal person response to it. Like, oh, you're charging him with treason because you are the cartels and the cartels are you, which I think is in fact true in many cases. The Mexican Constitution. Can I go down a rabbit hole on this?
Please, go
briefly?
Ahead. Let's do it.
It's a very interesting constitution. Technically, Mexico still lives under the Cardencista Constitution of 1917. But the Mexican Constitution is sort of like the ship of Theseus. Do you know what that is? You do know what that is, don't you?
No, please fill me in.
Don't you? I thought you watched Marvel television shows. The most recent exposition of the ship of Theseus was actually on WandaVision, which I think is
I did watch WandaVision. I'm just forgetting this.
Don't you remember when there's Vision and there's
just in case for our viewers, let's clue us into what you're referring to.
I'm sorry. Okay. Can we make the show about Marvel shows instead?
Next time.
The ship of Theseus. Anyway, it's on WandaVision. Actually, which is one of the few good Disney
really
Marvel
good.
shows.
Yes, I enjoyed it.
It was good. It gave me a lot of false hope for what turned out to be a pretty mediocre product in the long run. So here's the ship of Theseus. So the hypothesis is that you have a ship. It's made of wood. If you replace every plank of the ship, like there's like a regular replacement of like this plank, and you replace the mast and you replace it. Like eventually, there's no original wood left on the ship. So is it the same ship?
So if they have the same constitution, but you amend every single part of it, is it the same constitution?
1,000%. Okay. Exactly. That's what the Mexican Constitution is like. It has been so comprehensively added to and amended far beyond anything that's ever happened to the U.S. Constitution, that it is effectively the ship of Theseus. And so Japan, by the way, has a comparable case, although the Japanese Constitution works. So I wouldn't draw the comparison too far. But the modern Japanese constitutional order is actually technically a grand amendment to the Meiji Constitution, under which the regime that started the Second World War in the Pacific reigned. It's quite interesting.
Wow.
How a lot of this legal continuity happens. In any case, that's the grounds upon which El Guero is charged with treason. And if he's ever returned to Mexico, which will never happen, he will stand trial for treason against the Estados Unidos Mexicanos.
Because he basically turned himself into an authority.
No, because he turned El Mayo in. I mean, that's the crazy part about it. Is that El Mayo is the wronged vecino mexicano. He's like this horrific drug lord. Ismael Zambada García. He's the guy that's wronged, and he's the guy that they're going to the mat for with a treason indictment against the other guy. I mean, it's absurd at a level that I think only high-level Mexican civics is capable of producing.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because I was not going to figure out why a treason charge would have been there unless, again, it was what I was suspecting of. Okay, so are we just admitting that Sinaloa and Morena are like working together here? But let's talk about some other figures that are coming up in the news here and are attached to this story. Where does Rubén Rocha Moya fit into all this? So Governor of Sinaloa, what's happening with him?
Rubén Rocha Moya is the highest-ranking Mexican office holder now, currently under indictment by the United States. So the indictment for him came down, I believe, on April 29th this year. We talked about this on previous shows. So, we had the CIA agents who died in Chihuahua.
Right.
Along with two Chihuahuan state security agents on April 19th. 10 days later, hopefully I'm not off by a day. I think it's the 19th and 29th, but if it's not, it's like the 18th and 28th. And then 10 days later, in part in response to, frankly, the ham-handed insensitivity of Palacio Nacional versus the deaths of these CIA personnel, these indictments came down. And what's been interesting is that in indicting there were several indictments, but there's two that are significant. One is Rubén Rocha Moya, who you're asking about, who's governor of Sinaloa. There's also a senator named Insunza, who is a senator from Sinaloa, who also is indicted. And as we've discussed here on the show and in various other arenas, these indictments are a warning shot, basically. It's a warning shot. Hey, we can come after your political class. We've got enough to do it. But you probably want to extradite these guys,
Right.
and the opportunity offered by the Americans to President Scheinbaum and the technocrats around, or really, I'm not talking about the narco faction, is to clean out that narco faction with American help, and the Americans will do it if they take the opportunity. Instead, what has happened is that Rubén Rocha Moya, who is a terrible person, I mean, I don't think there's any question about it, has become the hill to die on for them, and what has been clearly communicated by the narco faction in Morena, which is significant to say the least, and also by the real power holder in Morena, which is still former President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who is arguably the godfather of the connection with the Sinaloa cartels, is that you cannot give this man up, because if you give this man up, there will be an unraveling. The Americans will continue to pull at the thread, and then the entire regime will come apart.
And do you think that would be the case, or will the United States accept this one and end it there? You don't have the crystal ball, but what do you think that their calculations correct?
I'm always I think they are probably right, but not necessarily. You can't assume that the Americans are going to go all the way with any given policy, honestly, and that's true under this president. It's true under other presidents too. So I think it's a step in the right direction. But I also think based upon interactions with policymakers in the United States and Mexico, I do think that there is an affirmative preference, generally speaking, even among people with whom I agree in policy, that they would much rather cooperate with the Mexican state than be in opposition to them. And so to the extent that they're forced to be in opposition to them because the Mexican state will not cooperate on corruption in its own ranks, will not cooperate on taking down narcos with whom they're connected, compels us into this. But and this is where I think the Morena side is misreading the Americans greatly because I have never seen any evidence that there's this real American aspiration to do some of the things that Claudia Sheinbaum has accused us of, which is like run Mexico and be the kingmaker and be...
Right. And what I think I really enjoyed about what you pointed out last episode is the United States would like nothing more than to not have to think about our relationship with Mexico.
100%.
Like it's a well-oiled machine. We do trade with them. Everyone's nice to each other. We all get along, the end. That'd be the American dream in this situation.
100%. Yeah, yes. If Sam Gamgee does not put the ring on, then the eye atop Barad-dur will not gaze upon him. I mean, that's basically, how's that for a metaphor?
Yeah, sure.
We're
all over the place. Marvel to Lord of the Rings today. It's fun.
It's a Gen X Tuesday here at TPPF.
Sure.
I think though that this is the miscalculation that they're making, and the solipsism of Mexican officialdom comes to the fore so often in so many things. It's absolutely come to the fore in this, and what it's done is it has crippled them in their response to the United States. And one thing that I'm watching with some interest is when there's going to be consequences for all this. When do the cohort of people who are responsible for advising the president of Mexico on how to deal with the Americans, when are they held accountable? Because they failed. They failed badly, and they have contributed. In that failure, they have contributed to the crisis that now grips U.S.-Mexican relations. Where it goes from here, we'll see.
Even with indictments like this, and starting with just a couple of names, it seems like the United States is giving Mexico and Morena an off-ramp here. So Claudia Sheinbaum could continue, take control of the narrative, say, hey, we're going to, basically do a law and order kind of thing here. Say, we're going to bring justice. And especially because a lot of their messaging is, this is for the people, it's for the poor, those are the people we're caring for. She could really do we're trying to take care of your community's messaging here if she wanted to. But
she could, but
like you were saying, a lot of her party and her advisors would have to get on board with that, and I'm not sure if that's the political climate there.
And the real boss will not allow it.
Yeah.
And I do think, kind of to fully answer your previous question, I do think that it is a non-zero risk that the Morena coalition, under particular circumstances, could dissolve. Morena will not stop existing. That's not what I'm getting at. Nor is there an obvious successor on the Mexican opposition side. I'm not implying that either. But you could see the ruling party splinter around different factions. They're not united around Scheinbaum right now.
Yeah, and I mean, even a couple of months ago, we were talking about approval ratings and the difference between AMLO and Scheinbaum. And to be very clear, approval ratings in Mexico for presidents are still off the charts compared to anything we see in the United States.
Yeah.
So hers being, I'm trying to remember if it was in the 60s or 70s. Apparently that's low for Mexico, but it was lower than AMLO's. But in the United States, it's still great. But if you have a party split into 3 different sections, I don't know where that's going to go.
They make a lot of hay over the approval ratings, and it is true that if President Trump had 70% approval ratings, I mean, there would be probably another parade tomorrow. But I think though that there's an unexamined aspect of this in particular with the approval ratings with Scheinbaum. I don't think we collectively have a very good understanding of what civic sentiment measurement looks like in the Mexican context and how to positively interpret it. I think it is probably true that a majority of Mexicans do actually approve of, so I'm not denying any credit. I think they probably do actually approve of President Scheinbaum's leadership. I also suspect that it is probably true that Mexican public opinion is probably going to default to whomever's in charge at a given moment. And so, how you tease all that out, I think that's doable. I think it requires kind of a different art of polling and data analysis than we bring to bear in an American context because it's a fundamentally different civics. I also think that there is not sufficient money to do it, nor sufficient expertise to do it inside Mexico.
So we're just using the polls we have and
we're kind of using the polls that we have, and we're assuming that they're methodologically good, that they're fully representative, and that they do things that we want them to do. And I don't know if any of those things are the case.
So I want to talk about how this relationship we have with our government is not only important because of things we've talked about before, like the USMCA agreement, but also because of something we don't bring up enough on the show, which is the southern border and our own security. So there was a letter that was sent out from a Mexican senator to the state legislators of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California, and specifically to the Republican members of those parties. Yeah. This is from Juan Carlos Lera de la Rosa. Yeah. Is there anything that stood out to you? Because something that was really interesting to me is it seems like there's these two things happening here. During part of the letter, he's actually talking about how the failure at the southern border is something that belongs to both sides. So that was an interesting amount of accountability coming up from the Mexican side.
Right.
And he specifically says it is a preventable failure that our two nations have both the capacity and the shared responsibility to address. First of all, that language, is that anything new coming out of Mexico?
It's not new, unfortunately. One of the things that you will hear time and again from Mexican sources is that the United States bears as much or more responsibility for the name your crisis, the border crisis, the cartel crisis, the drug crisis, the violence crisis. All of this is just as much our fault as theirs. And in fact, typically, this guy is actually the moderate option. Typically, the United States is more at fault in
Well, I guess that's what
narrative.
I was impressed by. I was saying, this is more accountability than I think we're usually at least highlighting on the show.
Asserting equitable accountability. And so what you hear, and look, I have sat in I've sat in Mexican government offices at a very high level and been told to my face that it's American gun trafficking that has made a Mexican civic breakdown a crisis.
That's the one that sets me off. That just makes me so frustrated.
It's totally true. It's totally true, which is absurd and insulting, right?
Yes.
Now, part of the reason, this particular individual who's reasonably well known actually. Felt secure saying this to me is because he was accustomed to American audiences who would either out of politeness or sincere ideological agreement, they would nod and say, oh, yeah, it's true. It is true that American gun trafficking is horrible and, we need to, And now there actually is a problem with American gun trafficking. It's not a causative problem to the same extent that Mexican civic breakdown and Mexican government partnership with cartels is, not even close. And it also begs a question as to why, we've got more free guns floating around than the Mexicans do. Why aren't we racked with cartel wars? Well, it's because we have a fundamentally different civics. That's why. And that's something that we should, feel free to say and assert and invite Mexican office holders to perhaps learn from if they're willing to.
Yeah. Well, continuing with this letter in particular. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read a quick
Please.
section. He says, I recognize that your legislators and the Congress you serve are rightly focused on order, security, and the rule of law at our shared border. So I'm reading this so far. I was nodding along saying, yeah, that's true. He says, I submit respectfully that these objectives do not conflict with the protection of human life. They depend upon it. A secure border and humane border are not competing goals. Again, at face value, agree with that notion.
Face value, we've said much the same.
Right. And then he continues, the dignity and life of every migrant must take precedence over any enforcement measure. And this is where I start to see maybe there is some conflict here. So, and that's not to say that we should kill anyone who's like stepping foot onto the border.
No.
But it is taking a jab at the side of at our political regime that has tried to do anything to stop the human trafficking and other inhumane instances that are just not even being talked about in this.
So there's a couple of backgrounds to this. One proximate background to it is that there have been, I think one, maybe two individuals who have died in, I believe, ICE custody within recent days. Forgive me, I haven't followed the story too terribly closely, except to the extent that the Mexicans have tried to make political hay over it. So, for example, there was a cease and desist letter delivered from Mexican authorities to detention center operators, private sector detention center operators in California, which is completely absurd. It's not their place to deliver that. The other long-standing, so this is less proximate, the other long-standing narrative that's at play here is this belief that any inhibiting of migration, illegal entry, so on, is by its nature immoral and inhumane, because there is a sacred mission at hand when one migrates, and so you can actually see this in the official. Like Mexican officialdom messaging, like the airport in Mexico City is typically will have pamphlets to give out and billboards and videos in operation, like
you
praising
grabbed on the pamphlets last time. So whenever we were in Mexico City, or maybe you've been there since then, but there was a pamphlet that was trying to help people who are wanting to illegally get into the United States with extra resources and stuff. And this is being printed by the Mexican government with their official seals and everything on it.
100%. Yeah, no, it's 100%, and it really goes up to the line, and I think in some cases well over the line of what consular efforts for foreign nationals should be allowed to do in the United States. And so when we think about that, but it takes place in the context of an ideology, and so this ideology holds that migration is intrinsically virtuous. It's intrinsically good for the sending nation. Therefore, we have an interest in promoting this kind of thing. And this is why, kind of in this moral framework that Lera de la Rosa has, and he's sent to these Texas lawmakers. For him, it's and for a lot of Mexicans on the left in particular, it's simply assumed that what is obviously good and obviously true is that we ought to help people migrate. And the argument that we've been making, the argument that the United States, since President Trump's return on January 20th, 2025, has made, is that the most inhumane thing that you can do actually is encourage human trafficking and mass migration, which results, as we know empirically, in such an array of evils, from sex trafficking to assaults to murders to drug trafficking and so on, that to shut the trade down as such is a mercy and a good done to some of the most vulnerable people on earth. And I will stand by that any day. Thankfully, I know the state of Texas does. I know that the current White House obviously does. But this guy doesn't, and that's why he's writing these letters. Now one last thing on it. Keep in mind is that the purpose of these letters is probably less to affect law in Texas or policymaking in Texas, which he has to know is not going to be particularly affected. But it's to show particular constituencies of his that he's sticking it to the Americans with moral hauteur, proceeding from an elevated place that we cannot hope to reach ourselves.
Well, he does offer to meet and host a delegation, and even has hosted at Mexico's northern border. But this still did strike me as something that's more balanced and tame language coming out of Mexico than what we've seen. Do you think that that's an indicator of the way that Mexican civil policy and the way that maybe their relationship with the United States is going to progress, or am I reading too much into this one letter?
I wouldn't read too much into this one letter. It is reflective of this particular senator and his office, but it's still a species of futility and effrontery all wrapped into one.
Well, do we have any hopeful things to end on here for our relationship with Mexico, Josh?
For our relationship with Mexico, look, as we've been saying for months now, there's a crisis unfolding. It's going to continue to unfold. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's going to continue to be spot cooperation. There's going to be some successes that we see. But on a strategic level, this relationship is not going anyplace good. And I say that with great regret because I think, you and I as South Texans, there's nobody who wants a good relationship with Mexico more. But ultimately, that's going to depend upon Mexico, the Mexican regime. I don't mean Mexicans in general, but the regime itself making some choices that it has yet to make. Chief among them, sending Rubén Rocha Moya, Senator Insunza, and the rest north to face justice. If I could, I assume we're about to close. Can I close with an anecdote?
Sure, please.
I was at a wonderful event in Washington D.C. I won't say with whom, but it was. You'll know who you are if you were listening. It was excellently put on. Amazing company, just phenomenal array of people who were involved in the U.S.-Mexico relationship. Actually, I was very, very privileged to sit in the back of that room. It was great. It was wonderful, and so with an organization that I admire a great deal. And what was interesting was that they had this board up front. It was kind of one of these reception things. And what you could do is it had a map of the United States and Mexico, and then the question was, what's the one thing that you think will most improve the U.S.-Mexico relationship? And you could take a Post-it note, and you could write your answer and stick it on the board. And so the idea was to get this collage of ideas. And so at the end of the evening, to kind of cut to the chase, it was covered with Post-it notes, and the Post-it notes almost all said things like trade, hope, understanding, respect. There was a lot of respects up there, probably from Mexicans. And then there were only, out of the literally over 100, there were only 3 that said extraditions.
Oh, really?
Mine was one of them.
I was going to say, were you all 3 of those, Josh?
No, I was not all 3, but I know there were 2 other friends in the room. But that really is the answer to a better relationship.
Well, from your lips to Mexico and Claudia Sheinbaum's ears, I guess.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people keep up with you?
Writing at National Review and also at TexasPolicy.com. So come join us.
There's plenty of stories that are going to be continuing, and we'll be able to bring that to you guys, and hopefully some of the more cartel drama. I promise I'll watch Narcos so I get more of the background.
Amazing.
But thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.